right, we are back, everybody. We are with episode 17 here with Words with Wallner. Of course, we have John Wallner, who's Chicago's personal injury law firm extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Now in episode 17, we're extraordinaire.
Yes.
How did we start out with the first one?
Yeah, you were
Just
you were
okay,
down
Larry?
here. We're going to get you way up here by the end of all this. Okay. And, of course, we have a guest today as well. And it's Frank Calabrese is here to join us today. And, Frank, why don't we learn a little bit about you? We know you worked for Wallner Law.
Yes,
when you
yes.
started out. But talk a little bit about that, and then talk about what you're
Let
doing
him
now.
talk about where he came
Yeah.
from before Wallner Law and,
Yeah.
and what he's doing continuing. Because for Wallner Law, he was a superstar,
He was, yeah.
but we couldn't pay him enough. His salary demands were crazy.
So I worked in kind of Chicago politics, which I found really interesting. Growing up, you watch the news, and I got to. I worked. One of my friends ran for alderman, and he won. And after that, everyone thought that I was really smart, and so I got to work on bigger and bigger campaigns, and it was a lot of fun. Immediately before I was working for Wallner Law, I was hired by the city council, and I redrew the ward boundaries. Every 10 years.
Wow.
And there's always a big fight, and every
Sure.
alderman, they want to keep their prize possessions, land developments, and stuff like that. But and also during the mayor's election, because I had so much experience doing political campaigns, a lot of TV. Journalists, they kind of used me as an analyst for the Chicago mayor's election. I got to be on TV a lot, kind of breaking down the results. So
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
So you helped with redesigning the boards of districts.
Tell us
and
about
voting.
your-
How does it?
Wait, can I say
Yeah.
something? So Frank, was working for us, and he said, Mr. Wallner, I have to leave. I said, what, right now? I said, why is that, Frank? And he said, Mayor Lightfoot is requesting my presence in this ward, in this, to redraw this political map, and she's very angry with me, so I have to leave the office right now and go to her office in City Hall.
It was across the street. So it
Yeah.
wasn't
So how
that far.
do you make decisions on that? What goes involved with making the decisions on the where people vote?
So the census is every 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And politically, it was a big problem because the city of Chicago, it's having a big demographic shift. So the west side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago, they're generally losing people. And some areas like Englewood, they're losing a lot of people. Where areas on the north side and the city center, they're gaining people. And so that's kind of a political shift because you had to remove a ward from the south side and bring it to the city center. And so as a result of the redistricting, there's one less ward on the far south side, kind of in the Roseland area, and that was moved to the West Loop. And I was kind of part of that process of designing, those wards. So I was the guy that actually was in the room drawing them, and the politicians would kind of tell me what they wanted. So
I don't think you'll make anybody happy,
no.
except for the former Mayor Lightfoot. You always had to probably make her happy to a certain extent.
She was never. Now that she's out of office, I can be more.
Yeah, I
honest,
was gonna
guess.
say, you can open up.
But yeah, she was not she was never very happy. You know what I mean? So all the kind of the news reports of her kind of being a unhappy, angry person. I found that very accurate.
So tell us more about the political landscape in Chicago.
So it's kind of a contact sport here. It's politics. We don't have Hollywood here. We have kind of local politics. And, the mayor's election, a few months ago, it was really engaging. You have really high engagement, high voter turnout. And it kind of a surprise ending. A lot of people, when you looked at the very beginning, I think a lot of people didn't think that Brandon Johnson was going to win at the very end. But he did. And I thought he won pretty significantly. So.
Yeah.
What was the,
sure.
just out of curiosity, I've always wondered this, I never had someone with your expertise to discuss with me, but what were the voters' issues that Paul Vallis wasn't elected, or how did that work out at the end? Because I thought before the election it was neck and neck between Vallis and
Good
Johnson.
question.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us what the constituents were telling you who voted.
It's a lot of kind of cultural identity. So so Paul Vallis, he kind of talks, not like the would-be mayor of a big liberal city. You know what I mean? He kind of had some again, it's kind of talking points you might find on Fox News, and it didn't do well. So he won areas that you would expect him to win, right? He won kind of like the southwest side, the northwest side of Chicago, areas that are more socially conservative or moderate. A lot of police live there. But he had trouble on the north side of Chicago, like Lakeview. A lot of people thought he would do decent in Lakeview. He lost Lakeview. He lost Uptown. He did terrible like in the Logan Square area. So, a lot of the more liberal Chicago voters, they were more kind of attracted culturally. They felt that Brandon Johnson shared their values more. So
Age maybe had a little bit of an effect.
yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Age was a huge thing. So I was getting some frantic phone calls from the Val's people about my thoughts on the turnout based on age. And so on the north side, you had a lot of younger voters voting, and though they voted for Brandon Johnson, they did not. That's my age group, and
Yeah.
my kind of social group that was heavily Brandon Johnson.
So if Brandon Johnson wants to continue to be mayor in 4 years, what does he need to do?
So I think Lori Lightfoot, if you remember, she won, winning every ward in 2019. She won with like 74%, but then she loses re-election, and that's because she didn't do a very good job of governing by building coalitions. You know what I mean? And she just kind of wasn't very likable in the sense, and she had some issues there. I think Brandon Johnson needs to kind of focus on building coalitions. He was elected into office largely by his support of liberal activists, who had a lot of enthusiasm, gave him a lot of support, brought a lot of vote. But to be a successful mayor, he has to kind of widen that coalition, so not every one of his kind of liberal activist roost goals, I don't think he'll be able to accomplish. But so I just think he should accomplish the ones that are most important to him, and I think that would be very successful.
Can I ask you one question, just out of
go ahead.
curiosity? And why was the voter turnout one of the lowest in the history of Chicago?
So actually, it was one of the highest.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So
I thought only.
Wasn't it like 22% or?
No, it was in the mid 30s. So
Okay.
it was the highest since the 80s.
Okay.
But it's just a trend. So in the 80s, just culturally, just kind of everyone voted. It's been going down since the 80s, but it's just not Chicago. It's kind of like a nationwide. But the vote turnout was actually pretty high. Initially, people thought the vote turnout was lower because there was so much vote by mail. Because of the pandemic, vote by mail has been much more popular.
Well, and I think too that it was really a close race, right? So in
Yes.
the end, you could argue that only 16% of the population voted for Brandon Johnson in this election. If it was truly at 30% and he won around 16, maybe 17%. So I think there's some argument out there to say it is a low turnout when only 16 to 17% of the population of Chicago actually voted for Brandon Johnson.
Yeah,
right?
he won by 5 points, which I think is, again, it's not overwhelming, but
Yeah.
I think it's significant, especially because of his candidacy, which, he was a progressive activist candidate. He was an ideological
Are you saying
candidate.
DeSantis wouldn't be his kind of guy?
No.
Is Brandon Johnson
So-
woke, whatever that means?
Well, I again, what does woke even mean?
I have no
these days,
idea.
right? But he definitely considers himself progressive, maybe even a leftist. To run that type of campaign and to win significantly, I think is significant.
So as an analyst, what are you doing right now? How is that, without really anything brewing as an election, how do you keep yourself busy? Or are you already kind of in the works of looking at the next thing?
Yeah, I'm talking to some people. I think the biggest race that's coming up is the state's attorney's race. So Kim Fox is the current state's attorney of Cook County, which includes Chicago, is not running for re-election. She's been in the news a lot for various things. But, the state's attorney's office, it's very important because the state's attorney has essentially unlimited discretion in how they prosecute crimes. So who the state's attorney is, it's very consequential.
Do we know who's running in that race?
So there could be a lot. At this point, there's a person called Clayton Harris the third, who is kind of looking like he's filling the Kim Foxx legacy. And then there's a recently retired judge.
By the way, you can't be in Chicago with a great sounding horn of a
Right.
train going
I
by.
love that.
I love
I thought the
trains.
train was about to come in this building.
Yeah.
And then there is a judge who recently retired from the appellate court. Her name's Eileen Burke. Joe Ferguson is thinking about running. He's the former city inspector general. So it'll be interesting, but I think in terms of local races for 2024, the state attorneys, far and away going to be the most important and consequential race.
In light of you discussing all these candidates and who they represent, what were the constituents of the aldermanic races in the neighborhoods that you were canvassing? What was their concern in the city of Chicago? Was it the price of eggs and milk, or taxes, or food deserts? What did you find in the communities, for example, that we had a guest on our previous episode? I think it was
Yes.
podcast number 16
Another
with
good
Sabrina
question.
King.
Yeah.
And you know how she was talking about the back of the Arts neighborhood, Pilsen, Englewood, New City, Chinatown. Like, did you ever cover those areas in your races? What were their constituents' biggest problems? What did they want addressed?
During the election, I was kind of out a lot, and also I follow the polling very closely. There was a lot of polling for the mayor's race, and all the polls said that crime, but by and far was the most important issue. A lot of these neighborhoods experienced, because of the pandemic and kind of some social change during the pandemic, a very significant uptick in crime, whether it be violent crime or, car thefts, stuff like that. So that was the number one issue in terms of voters. And that's also one of the reasons why kind of Paul Vallis did so well in the first round, because he really kind of coalesced around, that was essentially his only message, early on, was that, he's going to, kind of arrest people and put people in jail. And, he kind of found a following for that.
That's a huge issue in Chicago. We're facing it every day. You see
Right.
all this
Yeah.
new, all this new police presence where it never was before. That is affecting my visual look in the safety of the city. Like it's like I'm telling my kids now, they love riding their bikes and walking. They are to get to and fro wherever they're going, and I say, this is really crazy. I don't want you guys going out at night. This is pretty dangerous. I don't like how you're going out at night alone and not with other people to deter the crime that may happen to you, like stealing your phone or your wallet or causing harm for no apparent reason. So that is a concern that my own family has, and I can't imagine living in on a daily basis in our impoverished communities or people without means to escape these areas because of education, money, opportunities, wages, holding them down, not letting them advance. As you were talking about the South Side being decimated by population movement, and in your census you found that they were losing an alderman or a voice for them. I think the city has to tackle crime in a more aggressive manner, but also give people opportunities in those communities to grow, to prosper, and to become leaders in their community.
Yes.
So one thing is, John has helped people that don't have a voice in impoverished communities, and many times they're injured for various reasons, and he provides legal counsel for those individuals where maybe they may not had known that they could have legal counsel. With that said, you and I had a little bit of conversation prior to the podcast, and talking about some of the things that when you worked for Wallner Law and probate, like, can you share some of those stories, because they were really just, I was blown away with the type of things that you did, and please share.
It was really rewarding.
Tell them what it is about probate law in the areas that you worked for us in, and describe what you were doing on behalf of the families where you were talking about disabled children or adults that were disabled.
Right.
The matter. Tell us your understanding of probate court and what you were doing at Wallner Law to help these people, how they were situated.
So if you're injured, typically, John can represent you and he can get you a settlement and the check goes directly to you, right? However, there are kind of two unique situations. Well, if you die, then we have to give that money to your family members, and that is done through a court, which is probate court. Also, if you're under 18, that money goes to kind of a trust, and then you receive that money when you're 18 years old. And so, probate, they tend to be more complex cases, because obviously when, unfortunately, if you die in an accident, that tends to be, you deal with more money at stake, and, you deal with, it's more complicated. There was this one case, do you remember the case out of Will County? There was someone died without a will. I think the insurance settlement was like 1.7 million or something, and he did not have he died without a will, and he did not have contact with his children, and so I had to find his grandchildren. His children. No, his children actually passed.
Oh yeah.
It was his grandchildren, and I found one in Portland, Oregon, and then the other 3 were in Bloomington, Illinois, and then they worked at a dog daycare, and we used some investigation tools, and we were able to provide them with a substantial amount of money, because this family was estranged. The younger grandchildren didn't even know about the grandfather. The older grandchild that lived in Portland did, and so that was kind of an interesting case. And then there's a lot of cases that I dealt with where minors, they get significant injuries, but they recover fantastically. Young people, they just have this physical resiliency. So I'm reading these medical reports, that they break a few bones. You see them a year later, that they look like they're 100%, and we're able to get them, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars into an account what they can receive when they're 18. And most of the minors that I worked for, they came from kind of underprivileged backgrounds, and so it was really rewarding being able to give these kids a substantial amount of money that could really have a very positive impact on their life when they turn 18. They can use this for college or for a career. Extra $100,000 when you're 18 and don't have a lot of resources is very significant.
We've talked about this in other episodes of Wallner Law. I always tell parents, from impoverished communities that don't have much money, and the courts will tell this, and the judges, children do not support their parents. Okay, so if we get $1 million on behalf of a child's injuries, or we get hundreds of thousands of dollars with the fractured femur in surgery, the parents say, oh, let's use the kids' money to pay the rent, to pay our light bill, to give us a life that we've never had before. And at Wallner Law, we protect children's future. We do this on a daily basis, and Frank has had a hand in this, that if a child does get, for example, $500,000, we will structure this money, not to get it when they're 18, but we'll do 4 years. If college does cost $50,000 a year, we'll get them an annuity that will give them $50,000 per year only for 4 years. And then when the child's 25, we'll give them money, 30, 35, 40. It's to protect them. One, they didn't grow up in a community that taught them finance, taught them money management, taught them any kind of the way of the future, because in impoverished communities, sometimes they say, clients will say to me, and I'm not kidding, when my kid made it to 25 years old, it's a miracle. So hopefully Brandon Johnson will get this crime under control, where people's lifespans will be looking beyond 21, that they will see a future, and that Wallner Law, when we do achieve these successful results on behalf of minors or disabled people, that they will, and I explained to them, we're going to go to court, and let me tell you something, we're not going to get you $1 million on your 18th birthday, because there's a future for you. We could pay for your college, and when you get married and you have children and you have family, you'll have money for them to go to college. But when you're in an impoverished community, in the communities we were talking about with Sabrina King and on previous episodes of Wallner Law, we teach them there is a future for you. Here it is. And I find that richly rewarding also, and we've told Frank about this, and he explains that to the family, the power of annuities and financial settlements to pay out in the future. And that's a big benefit. Only at Wallner Law that we're honored that people do call us to represent them. But let me tell you about a future for you. And also, when parents may not get along and it causes trouble in the household, and Frank's talking about a case where the kids objected to a marriage, and the children of this father, they did not like him. They didn't like the choices he was making in life, and they cut off all talking, like estrangement, with this their father. Unfortunately, the father did pass away in this accident. But why are the children entitled to money damages in a wrongful death case when it's based on love, life, and support? Hugging and kissing of their loved ones when they were estranged and they're not with them, because every kid has a chance to come back to their father, to come back to their loved one. At 16, your hormones may say may be angry and upset and not care to want to be with your father. But how about at 25? Don't they have a chance to reunite with their father? How about 30 and 35? Life goes on. And emotions and trouble just because of your father not loving your mother and wanting to be with another woman. The kids may not understand that. But here in this case, we have children moving out of the family nest, moving out of the home, no more celebrating of Christmas and New Year's and Mother's Day and Father's Day. They leave the home out of anger. In this case, we had an impossible time tracking down these kids. Literally, we were on social media, Facebook, finding them. We used private investigators. And Frank, through his means of electronic communications and maybe social media, Twitter or Instagram, how he found these people, we gave them, say, your father passed away without loving and hugging and kissing you, and you didn't have the chance to love and hug and kiss your father, or have a phone call with him before he passed away, and that enabled us to get a huge settlement on behalf of this person. That because the insurance company says, hey, wait a minute. The people that will be getting these money, the heirs of the decedent's estate, never loved him, never cared for him, never hugged him, never kissed him, never had a phone call with him. But it doesn't stop today. You could have love and respect and care for your dad and mom in the future, and we achieved a huge financial success on behalf of this decedent, and his children and grandchildren have got the money now for the love loss that they couldn't have then, and we were proud to represent this family. And it did touch my heart that a family was so ripped apart and estranged over the choices that a dad made in his love life, or who he wanted to be as his partner for the rest of his life. And we thank you for tracking down these people, because, by the way, if you don't have money to give these people, the money goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's just incredible, and I think that just goes again to the testament that the work that you do, John, and certainly the work that you did.
Can I just talk to you about other things, Wayne? I know
Sure.
we touched on
We'll make this the last word.
It will.
Okay.
That you fail to have a will in your life, you could be punished by money not going to the direct heirs and decedents or loved ones that you wanted to go to. So I always tell about the importance of family planning. It doesn't matter how much money you have now, just a will to say, upon my passing, where I'd like my assets to go. Because when children, for example, die and the father was never part of life, and they do come back to court and say, hey, judge, I gave him a gift when he was 6 years old. I bought him pajamas. And I despise people that do that, and the courts do adjudicate the rights of those family members that did love, care for their children. So that's always something I fight for the children, the families of who did support this child in court. And I tell anyone, you don't get involved in your child's life, and you never did, we're not going to richly reward you.
Yeah.
And so I fight for those
child advocate.
Children. And family's important to me. And I loved how in episode 16 we had Sabrina King saying, you know what? These mothers have addictions. They're unable to care for the children. Let's empower the grandchildren to do same. And I believe that even Frank in his work and getting these awards redrawn to show, let's empower the people that have no power behind it because the census may have changed. Let's have a leader that'll care for these people. And Brandon Johnson, obviously in the last election, spoke to those people who felt that crime was ruining their lives, and they saw no hope. So let's go with Brandon Johnson, who is more liberal and more left leanings, and Paul Valls, who spoke on an intellectual level and above the capacity of understanding of the population that was looking for a leader to represent them. in Chicago. So Frank, we really thank you for coming in and talking to us about politics and,
Yes,
and the
thank you.
communities and your work
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Wallner Law. And we appreciate the work for Wallner. We appreciate the work you're doing now on behalf of those people and those citizens looking for a voice to represent them in Congress and in the city and in their neighborhoods.
And you always have an opportunity here for the last word. Before we end the podcast, I always like to have you to have, John's kind of had his last word. What would you like to say? Last thing.
Oh, I just, I had a really rewarding time working for Mr. Wallner at Wallner Law. It was just great to help, families that really needed help. Again, like the probate cases, those are the cases that tend to be the most dramatic. And, giving, real opportunities for kids that come from underprivileged backgrounds, helping families when they have a loved one die. It was just a really rewarding time, and I felt like I was able to help a lot of people. So it was a great time with.
Thanks, Frank, for your
John.
time today. Appreciate you coming in, man.
And then, as a political analyst, how can people follow you? What are your handles?
I'm on Twitter. I'm at
Yeah.
at Frank Calabrese. I'm online. You can find me on Instagram and stuff. But I have my own website. I call it Big Shoulders Consulting. But I have a day job now. I adjudicate tax appeals for Cook County, so I'm not as involved as politics as I was a few months
So
ago.
let's lower the taxes, put more money in everyone's pocket, right?
Right. So.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for joining. I thought it was a really interesting conversation we had. And it just goes to show you just how politics also get rolled into certainly personal injury law. And we do thank you, Frank, for joining us. And again, reach out to John if you have any questions about personal injury law. And then, of course, please follow Frank. He is has great insight, as you can tell, into Chicago politics. And so we do appreciate that. And we'll see you next time.